Hey guys, this is A Lot of Life with Joel, and today I thought I would discuss diabetes! What is it? And also, hopefully, explain the name of my YouTube channel. Well, diabetes is complicated, and there are many different types, somewhere between 5 and 7. But what they all have in common is that they all cause high blood glucose. Glucose is the sugar that your body uses for fuel. The first two types I will talk about are both autoimmune diseases, which makes them different from the other types. All right, type number 1, I guess appropriately called type 1, or juvenile diabetes, occurs in roughly 5 to 10% of all diabetic cases. And as I said, it's an autoimmune disease where the body's immune system thinks that the beta cells in the pancreas are the enemy and it destroys them. If you had the beta cells, like normal folks do, then the beta cells would be producing a hormone called insulin. And what insulin does is it takes the glucose in your blood and transports it into the cells to fuel them. So when your pancreas doesn't have beta cells, it can't produce insulin to get the glucose in your blood into your cells. So the glucose just builds up. And having high blood glucose can wreak havoc on your body, causing immediate and long-term complications. Without beta cells, type 1 diabetics are insulin dependent and require constant insulin from a pump or from multiple daily injections. Type 1 is known as juvenile diabetes because it typically presents in childhood, and also it develops very quickly, meaning that by the time of diagnosis, the child has little to no insulin production left. And currently there is no known cause and no known cure for type 1 diabetes. All right, type number 2 is often referred to as type 1.5 or Lada, hence my channel name. Lada is latent autoimmune diabetes in adults, or late onset autoimmune diabetes of adults, or late onset autoimmune diabetes of adulthood. You fill in the acronym. But either way, I believe that it's technically classified as a slow progressing form of type 1 that manifests in adults. And it typically takes anywhere from about 6 months to 6 years to become insulin dependent after diagnosis with Lada. Because of this slow progression, Lada can often be misdiagnosed as the next type that we're going to talk about. For me, it took about 2 years to become insulin dependent. See my diagnosis video for details if you're interested. Well, I haven't actually done one yet, but I will soon. And it's also one of the lesser studied forms of diabetes. But there is some evidence that it does share some of the characteristics of the next type that we'll talk about, in addition to the autoimmune nature that it shares with type 1. All right, the third type I will talk about is called type 2 diabetes, sometimes called adult onset. And this is where things get a little confusing. I've heard some people call pre-diabetes its own separate type, but I like to think of it more as a precursor to type 2 diabetes, since I believe they share the same characteristics and the same causes. With type 2 diabetes, and I suppose pre-diabetes, they're typically caused by a combination or either genetics, an unhealthy lifestyle, or a combination of the two. And the big thing with type 2 and pre-diabetes, the big characteristic is an insulin resistance. So in type 2 diabetics, they may be producing all the insulin they need, but their body isn't able to utilize it as effectively as in a non-diabetic. And in type 2 can also have some issues producing enough insulin, but I think the primary characteristic here is an insulin resistance. And in type 2, as pre-diabetes, which is different from type 1 and type 1.5, is that in a lot of cases, or most cases, type 2 can be reversed through a healthy, active, low-carb lifestyle. And that is another big difference between them. So it's insulin resistance and not the destruction of the beta cells. So it's not an autoimmune disease. It is a metabolic disorder, which can hopefully, in most cases, be reversed. And unlike the next one we'll talk about. All right, the fourth type of diabetes we'll talk about is called MODY, or mature onset diabetes of the young. And it's considered a monogenic diabetes, meaning it's due to a mutation in a single gene, unlike types 1 and 2, which are polygenic, meaning there's multiple genes involved. Now, MODY is inherited, and it typically manifests or develops in those under 25, hence of the young. And it's fairly rare, representing only about 1 to 2% of all diabetic cases, which is in stark contrast to type 2, which is something like 90% of all diabetic cases. Now, depending on the gene defect or the mutation, it can manifest a little differently. MODY is a sort of a wide range of types. There's at least a dozen that they've identified so far. And they range from patients needing no medication to just oral medication, and in some of the types, they're completely insulin dependent. All right, type number 5 is called gestational diabetes, and it affects previously non-diabetic women during pregnancy. Gestational diabetes is caused by an improper insulin response, and it's usually treated through diet and typical diabetes medications, including insulin. Gestational diabetes affects roughly 3 to 10% of pregnancies, but it usually goes away after the baby is born. However, unmanaged gestational diabetes can lead to larger than normal birth weights, and after pregnancy, the mother is at a greater risk of developing type 2 diabetes. And in the child, they are prone to childhood obesity and have a much higher chance of getting type 2 diabetes later in life. All right, well, the last potential type of diabetes is Alzheimer's. Now, some people are calling it diabetes of the brain, and they're classifying it as a type. So if you want to throw in pre-diabetes, we're up to about 7 types. We've got type 1, type 1.5, type 2, gestational, MODY, pre, and Alzheimer's. So 7 types of diabetes. And I hope this video was somewhat educational. If you would like to leave a comment, if you feel there's anything I missed, or if you just like to discuss something, so leave a comment, and thanks, and I'll see you later. Bye.